All right, everybody. So we had a little break and we are back now with the queries. In our last video, we looked at two queries. We created a query for those persons who were staying in a single room, and also we did one for persons born before 1955. At this point, we're going to create what is called a calculated field query. In this query, you're going to be required to calculate the balance due for each resident, and you're going to be saving it as balance due. I'm going to copy the name of the query just for the time being to make it easier for me later on. So I don't have to type in the name of the query when I'm ready to save the query. So I'm going to copy that. Then we're going to now go and calculate the balance due for each resident. Now for this query, we won't need a whole lot. So let's go. All right. So first thing we do is to click on the Create tab, and as usual, Query Design. Now we want to have the balance due, but we want to also have resident data, so we have to put in the resident table. Then we also need to add the rooms table because the room table has the cost and stuff. Well, maybe we won't need a room table. Let's see for the time being. We add the resident rooms table. The resident rooms table will show you the amount due and the amount paid. So in this case, we don't need the rooms table. I'm going to remove that later on. We can close the window. So I'm going to right click and remove table. Now the relationship still exists, so we don't have to worry about duplicate records. First thing we're going to do is add the fields by double clicking. And we just really want the amount due, the amount paid, and then we're going to do the calculated field. I'm going to widen my window so you can see a little bit better. For the calculated field, you're creating a new field in using a query. So you're using existing fields to be able to be performing some form of calculation, and that calculation is going to result in a new field that never existed being created. So I'm going to widen this column. So I click between the two columns and widen. Just as in math, you would need to give the value a name. So the name of my value is balance due, or field is balance due. And then in math, you'd have the equal sign, but I'm going to be using the colon to replace the equal sign. Now I'm going to do the balance due. I'm going to have to deduct the amount due, amount paid from the amount due. Whenever you're using fields that are coming directly from a table, you have to enclose them in square brackets, and you must type them exactly as they appear in the table. So if there are spaces in the field names, type back exactly the same. If there are capitalizations, same way. You cannot make any changes, because if you do, the query will not work. So I have amount due here in square brackets minus, and in square bracket again, amount paid. And this one does not need any required you to put in any criteria, because it's for everybody who is in the database. All right, so we have our first name, last name, amount due, amount paid, and our calculated field. As usual, we are going to run the query to see. Oh, see now, I'm glad this came up, because it gave me the opportunity to show you that if you did not type the field name correctly, you're going to have an error, or it's going to ask you to enter a parameter value. Now, I did not realize I had an S on this, so I'm going to remove it and then run the query again. And here we have all the residents, the amount they have owing, the amount they have paid, and the amount they have outstanding. So we're going to save this query. I'm going to right click and say save. I could have saved it from inside of the query itself. Let me show you how to do that. Go back to the design view, click on the save icon, and save my table, my query rather. So because I had it copied, the name copied already, I could just simply paste. You didn't see how I did it a while ago, because right clicking is not an option here. So what I did was I hold on the Control key and press V as a shortcut for paste. And I click OK. And I run my query, and here is my query. Now I'm going to close this query because I have another one to do. In fact, I have a few more to do. Next query says, create a query that will create a new table, and this part is essential, a new table with first name, last name, gender, room type, amount paid, and balance due for each resident. Now this query is going to come in very handy later on, and you will see as we go along. So how do we do that? We go to create, query design, and we're adding the residence table, the rooms table, resident rooms table, and we need to add the rooms table. We need to also add a query to this, and that query is the balance due query, because we're going to need to know the balance that is due. All right. Oh, let me edit the balance due query, because I realize now that I am not there's no relationship, and we're gonna need the some code here to create the relationship. So I'm gonna do that and come back. So here I have my balance due query that we had previously done. All right. Now we needed to add the resident number in order to find something to be able to create a relationship between the tables so that the balance due will work with other queries. So I'm going to go ahead and add the resident number, but you notice it's at the end right here. I want it ideally have it as a first field. So I'm going to put my mouse over it like this, hover the mouse, click. Once I've highlighted the entire column, I'm going to put my mouse at the top of the column, click, hold it down, and I'm going to drag it to my extreme left, therefore relocating the resident number. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to run just to see what it looks like, and I'm going to close. Now we're going to go back now to the other query that we were supposed to create earlier before we recognize the issue, which is question number or query number 4. I didn't even have a name for this query. Let us give it a name. We're going to call it report table query. Report table. So this one is a little bit different from the others. All right, so let us look again. We need the first name, last name, gender, room type, amount paid, and balance due for each resident. So let's go ahead and get that done. Create, query design. So we need the resident table, all 3 tables, and we need the query that says balance due. This one. I think that's it. Yes, because that's what we do with the resident number. All right, so I am not sure what is happening with my database, but the queries are not showing up on the left-hand side. They are there, but for some strange reason, they're not showing up on the left-hand side, but when I close it and reopen it, it shows up. All right, so let's see how best we can get this done now. So we're supposed to add the first name, last name, gender. Then we're supposed to add the room type, then the amount paid, and the balance due. So we're going to, initially we had our select query here. Selected, we're going to go over to the option to the right and select make table. When it asks us to make the table now, we're going to call the table report table query. Report, just call it report table. And don't add the query to it, report table. And you're asked to whether you want it in the current database or in another database. We want to save it in the current database. So we click OK. Right? And all of a sudden now the balance due query comes, but the other one does not come up. All right, it's there anyhow. So we can right click and save this, and we're going to save it as report table query. So the new table is called report table, but the query is called report table query. And then we click OK. And I'm going to right click and close. Now, eventually the new table and the query will appear. Hopefully when I move on to the next query, you will be able to see it. All right. You may not have that issue when you are ready to create your database. Now the next Next query is called update room cost. Now with your update room cost, you need to create an update query. Let's look at what the question says. Due to the pandemic and the increase in expenses, the cost per night for each room has been increased by 20%. Create a query to effect this change. Save it as update room cost. Now, for you to be able to do this, you will have to create what is called an update query. And for update queries, I generally give the advice that one, you make a copy of the table that you're going to make changes to, so you can see the original as well as the new values. And I also do that for delete queries, and we have one of that to do later on. So let's go and do this one. So we go ahead and we say create query design as usual, and we want to update the cost. Well, before we do that, let me close it. I didn't even follow my own advice. Right click and close this. We're going to make a copy of the rooms table. So I'm going to right click, say copy, right click, and paste. And we're going to leave it as copy of rooms table, or you could just simply say rooms table copy, but safer when you have the copy in front. Click OK. So we're going to go ahead again, create query design, and we're going to be using the copy of the rooms table instead of the original rooms table. So I'm going to double click to add that and close. Now, what I really want to update is the costs. I'm going to change the type of query here to an update query, and it asks me for the field. I want to add the field update to, and we want to increase the cost by 20%. So I'm going to put the field in square brackets. And then there are two ways we can do it mathematically. It depends on how you understand math. You can convert the new percentage to a decimal. So instead of multiplying 20% of the cost and then adding back that value to the cost, I just multiply the cost by 1.2, which is 101 for the 100%, which is the original cost, and the 0.2, which is for the additional 20%, which is how I'm going to do it. But I'm going to do it the second method, using the second method, just for persons who may not understand. So cost, we'll put our colon, and sorry, just put cost and then the multiplication symbol and put 1.2, and then we can run the query. It says you're about to update 5 rows because there are 5 records in the rooms table. Say yes. Now, whereas in previous queries, you'd have seen a table being created. Sorry, you won't see a table in this one. What it does, it just makes a change. So because you don't see a table, you might think that you have not done anything. But if you run the query again, it's going to take the updated cost and update it again by another 20%. All right, so let me show you the other way. I'm not going to run the query with it, but I'm going to show you the other method that you could have used. I'm going to add the cost field again. And what I could have done is just say cost times 0.2 plus, and then we put back the cost. So whichever way you understand and whichever way works for you, it's fine. But I have chosen to do it this way because it is much shorter. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to delete this column that I don't need. So right click on it and say cut. I'm going to just readjust this column as it's a bit too wide. And I'm going to just save my query. All right, so the query is called, let me see what it was called, update room cost. I'm going to just copy this. And remember, you can't paste here. So you have to just say hold on the control key and press V and click OK. So that is the update room cost query. Now we have one more query, and that's the delete resident query. It says a family member is dissatisfied with the service and is permanently removing the relative from the facility. Choose one resident to remove and use a query to delete that record. Save it as delete resident. 2 things you need to do for this query before you actually do the query. I'm going to close this. You need to, one, make a copy of the residence table because that is the one you're going to be working on. And two, you need to pick out a resident. So I'm going to do the pick out a resident first. So that person is, for me, is going to be the first person, Adasa Golding, and I'm going to copy that person's residence number, right? Then I'm going to close the table, and I'm going to make a copy of the table. So I'm going to copy, and I'm going to paste. No, unfortunately, I just lost Adasa Golding's resident number because of the two copies, but that's fine. We can always go back and copy it. Let me click OK to save the copy of the table. Right? No. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go back into the residence table and copy the resident number. I'm going to close the table again. Then I'm going to go to the Create tab, Query Design. I'm going to select Copy of Room Resident Table and add that. I'm going to close here. When you're doing a delete query, it's important for you in the query type to select delete, because the fields will change, because it's going to ask you what to delete here. And for the delete query, we must add every field that is in the table. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, because you're deleting an entire row or record, so you have to add all the fields. Resident number, first name, last name, DOB, gender, next of kin, and we're going to add the address information, street, town, parish, right? And it says delete where, and the criteria, we want to put it under resident number. You cannot put the resident number under any other field, because it would not belong to that field, and it would be searching for AG14. If you had put it under first name, it would be searching for AG14 under this, and it wouldn't find it. You could have used Adasa Golding, but when you're doing that, make sure you spell it correctly. And it is not advisable for you to use first names and last name, because you could have had somebody else in a table called Adasa Golding. But in this case, where you use the resident number, only one person would have a particular resident number. So it's always safer to delete where, and you put the field name for the primary key, or where there's a field that does not repeat, has no potential to repeat. All right, so once you have added the fields and put in your criteria, it's now time to run the query. So we click on run. It asks me, are you well, it tells me you're about to delete one row. And it asks if you're sure, you say yes. I'm going to save the query as, and let's just look for the name of the query, delete resident. I'm going to copy that. Then go back and Control V to paste and OK. Now, for you to be able to see whether or not the deletion was done, simply open the copy of the resident table. And of course, mine is not showing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to close the database and reopen it so that it will come up. And you'll also realize that the other queries that I created that were not shown, for example, the report table query and the update room cost, and even the new table that was called, and I'm not seeing the table. It should be there though. Yeah, let's get a new table called report table. Not seeing it, but let's move on. So here we have the new table called delete resident. And if you open the copy of the resident table, you should see that Adasa Golding is no longer there. And you see, she's no longer at the top. So we can close this. All right, so what I did was, in order to show my report tables, I'm not sure if it's my database that is giving trouble, because I wasn't having the issue before. But since when I was testing out the make table query, it seemed to have created some problems for me. Don't know if when I restart my computer, I'm going to have it any better anyway. So what I did was I ran the report table query and just clicked OK for the two options. It asked me to paste the 10 records. I said yes or OK, and close the database and reopen it, and then the report table comes up. So if you double click on the report table, you're going to be able to see the new table that we created for our report that we're going to do later on. All right, so let's just go back to the question paper and see what else we have left to do. So the last thing we have to do in our portfolio is the report. And what I'm going to do, I'm not going to put it in this video. I'm going to do it in a separate video. So I'm going to end this video right here. And we're going to, in the next video, look at how we create the report.